Welcome to Sliver and Bite TV. Today we're making donuts. You may be wondering of the origin of the donuts. There is a little bit of a grey area here, but said to be from European history. However, there are some scholars that would say that it was earlier invented in the Middle East. However, the modern day donut was brought by Dutch immigrants in the 17th, 18th century to America, New York to be specific. So let's get started. You would have seen me using my digital thermometer to make sure that my milk was at 35 degrees Celsius or 95 degrees Fahrenheit. I've just sprinkled over a tablespoon of sugar and the yeast. And the reason why we warm the milk is to activate the yeast. We'll just give it a little stir just to make sure that all of the yeast is covered in the milk, and then we'll cover it with some cling film. If you do have a small plate or a lid, you can put that over as well. You'll see that I've also put the tea towel over it. I want to retain the heat, so we want to make sure that we just either put it in a warm place or a tea towel over it will suffice. Now I'm just melting down my butter. We want to melt this, and then I will also put that under the tea towel. We want it to lose a little bit of its heat, but still have it melted. If it does solidify on top, you might need to zap it again in the microwave. Now just whisking the eggs loosely, just so that it mixes in with the butter a little easier. And now that the butter has lost a little bit of its heat, it won't cook the eggs. And now adding in the vanilla and the nutmeg and salt to the butter and egg mixture and mixing that well. Now it's time to reveal the yeast. You'll see that it's all floated and expanded to a foam on the top of the milk. So we've successfully activated the yeast, and just pouring that into the butter and egg mixture. And just combining that before we add that to our mixing bowl. So adding the sugar to the mixing bowl with the dough hook attachment, and roughly a third of the flour at this stage. And then pouring in the liquid mixture, making sure that you're scraping the bowl out. You want to make sure you've got all of that milk and egg mixture. And for now, just putting that on a low speed, just to make sure that you don't have your flour fly everywhere. Then you can gradually increase the speed. That's been mixing for approximately 2 minutes, and I'm going to add 1/3 of a cup of flour. And then on again for roughly a minute or two at a low, and then up to a medium speed, just to incorporate that 1/3 cup of flour. And after 2 minutes, I am going to remove the dough hook and just scrape down the bowl, because there will be some flour that is stuck to the bottom of the bowl and not being incorporated into the wet mixture. And if you don't have the luxury of having a mixer, you can most definitely incorporate the flour at the same rate into a mixing bowl with a wooden spoon or a spatula. And once you get to the point where it's too thick to stir, you will dump it out onto a bench. It will take a little longer and you might get a really sore arm, but as long as you're incorporating it gently and then kneading it, you will have the same result. As you saw, I added in another 1/3 cup of flour, and now just doing another scrape down just to make sure that I'm getting all of that flour incorporated.
That's kick.
You'll see that the dough is starting to take shape now. I'm not even going to bother lifting up the arm of the mixer. I'm just going to try and gently put it in without getting it stuck in the top of the dough hook attachment. And you'll see it's starting to even thicken and pull away from the walls of the mixing bowl. I still have the mixer on low at this stage because I don't want the flour to fly out. And until it basically turns into a dough ball, then I will increase the speed. As you can see, it's on quite a high speed now, and at this point we've been mixing for just under 10 minutes. And now that we have a decent dough, just putting in the last couple of cups of flour. We don't want to put the whole amount in because there's no way of going back and wetting the dough, so we want to have at least a 1/3 of a cup left in the bowl to play with, just in case it is still too moist. Then on slow to incorporate, and then we're going to basically turn it up to full speed and really start to knead this dough. The dough's been on high for roughly 3 to 4 minutes. I will turn it off and cut the dough away from the dough hook. You run the risk of having the center part of the dough not be kneaded because it simply sits and spins on the dough hook. So you want to cut it away and then start it on slow and build up the speed so you're making sure the dough is actually being kneaded correctly. With the mixer being on high and being unbalanced because of the dough, you may need to hold the arm down to make sure that it doesn't shake off of the bench. Once the dough has been on high and kneading for about 5 to 6 minutes, you can bring that down to a low or turn it off. Grab a large mixing bowl and lightly coat it with some vegetable oil. This dough is perfect. It's a little sticky, but it is definitely not too dry and it's definitely not too wet because it's pulling away from the mixing bowl effortlessly. So make sure that you apply the oil with your fingers or some cling film because it does tend to slide down and pull at the bottom of the bowl. Lift out your dough and turn it in like you're darting some socks. Then flip it over, pinch it together like a dumpling, just to really seal that in, and then put that in the center. Cover with some cling film or a lid, and then to trap some of that heat from the dough, I'm going to put on a tea towel, and then that's in a warm place for 1.5 to 2 hours. Give you a little sneak peek of the size before, and then this is after. So it's definitely doubled in size. I will keep that in the warm area while I prepare my bench, just lightly flouring the bench space where I will roll out the dough and also my baking trays, because once you form your doughnuts, you will rise them for another half an hour. I always like to punch the dough before tipping that out onto the bench, and we're going to lightly knead it before using a rolling pin to flatten it out to approximately 1.5 to 2 centimeters in thickness. And you'll see on this side, it's got a few of the seams. You want to make sure that you are pressing those down, because I actually left in a bit of a donut fail later on, and it was due to the two sides of the dough not sticking together, and after it's deep fried, it tends to pull apart because it didn't have the wetness to stick to each other. But I'll show you that a little later on. So just grabbing your desired cookie cutter size, and then I've also at the bottom left hand corner there have the small donut hole size to form the donut. And the reason why we put a hole in the center of the donut is to cook it more evenly. If you were to omit the donut hole, you would have to have the oil on a lower heat and have it submerged for longer. So this way, it's basically 40 to 50 seconds each side, and it's perfect. And then removing the donut hole and placing that on the lightly floured baking tray, which I will cover with a tea towel and put into that warm space for half an hour. We don't want to leave it for too long, otherwise you will end up with the donuts being overproofed, and we don't want that. We need them only for the half an hour. I'm now combining the leftover dough into a dough ball to roll out again. This is where I went wrong with the donut fail. I didn't knead it enough, but the reason why I didn't knead it enough is because I didn't want it to be too dense. By over kneading and playing with the dough for too long, it becomes really quite firm. So the least amount of touch, the better. I also just lift it up as if I was stretching out a pizza base to let it sort of hang, and then I'll lift it up and actually shake it to thin it out just that little bit extra. And then covering both of my trays up with a tea towel, back in the warm environment for a further half an hour, just to slightly rise. And while that's happening, I will start warming my oil. We want this ideally at 160 to 170 degrees Celsius, and that's approximately 320 degrees Fahrenheit. I've just poured in my cinnamon into the sugar, ready to dust half of my donuts. And then adding my cream and vanilla to my powdered sugar to create the glaze. You'll see that the glaze was a little too thick, so I add in another portion of the cream, along with a little bit more of the vanilla essence, because you want to make sure you've got that nice hint of vanilla in your glaze. The amount of donuts is approximately 14 that you'll get from the dough. So this mixture for the glaze will do all of your donuts. I have a little bit left over because I put some cinnamon sugar on half of them. Just checking my oil to make sure that I'm not too hot and I'm on track, ready to drop in my donuts. And as I mentioned, just adding in a little bit more of the cream. There is a fine line between it being too thick and too thin. If the mixture is too thin, it will slide straight off of your donuts. Too thick, it's hard to apply. So it's a little bit of trial and error, but make sure you've got enough ingredients on hand to alter it. And also just that little bit more vanilla. Okay, we've got that at a decent consistency now. I am just going to use a spatula just to make sure that I've got any little dry bits combined. And then I'm going to use a funnel and put that into a squeezy bottle. It'll be easier to apply the glaze. However, you are certainly able to dunk your donuts into the mixture, as you may have seen in one of my YouTube shorts. and then just putting that off to the side to drip through the funnel. And now getting ready to deep fry these donuts. So I've got a wire rack over a tray just to have any of the excess oil drip off, and then carefully dropping 2 of the donuts into the pot. You don't want to overcrowd it, so I wouldn't put a third in this one. You can certainly have a larger pot and do several more. However, you want to make sure that you've got a decent little system going on here, because you will remove the donuts after they've been flipped and then let cool slightly before dusting them with your cinnamon sugar, and then a little bit cooler glazing them. After you've dropped them in, you want to have it there for just under a minute, and then flip, and then another minute on this reverse side. I got it to approximately 40 seconds when I looked back over the video. Doesn't seem like a lot, but all of my donuts were fully cooked through. So just fishing that out with a strainer, because you don't want to take half the oil along with you. I also have some paper towel just to dab the bottom of the strainer so that I'm not unnecessarily dragging oil all over the bench. Here's a little close-up, dropping them in. You want to keep a close eye on the temperature of the oil, because it can fluctuate quite rapidly once it's already at its temperature. As you can see, there was a bit of discoloration on the reverse side, so the side that was facing you. That means the oil was too hot, so you want to just bring it down a little bit. But don't they look fantastic? I'm going to put some cinnamon sugar on some of these donuts. They've been sitting on the wire rack for 2 to 3 minutes, so you want to get onto that relatively quickly. Otherwise, the donuts will dry out a little too much and the cinnamon sugar won't stick. However, if you do it too soon after they've been taken out of the oil, the sugar will simply melt onto the donuts. So again, there's a little bit of fine-tuning with your timing going on here, but it's all trial and error. And once you do these donuts once, you're going to be doing them forever. And now we have the donut that I poorly kneaded together. You'll see that I'm tossing it around, and as I go to pull it out of the cinnamon sugar, it pulls apart. So that's why we need to ensure we are kneading the dough correctly so that we don't have a donut blowout. And now let's witness this beautiful glaze going on. Because the glaze was sitting off to the side for a little while, you'll see that I'd already glazed one of the donuts and it was a little thick. So I just ran some warm water over the base of the squeezy bottle and it loosened it up a little bit. These donuts were sitting out for about anywhere from 5 minutes to 10 minutes. We want to make sure that they're, again, not too hot, otherwise the glaze will just melt straight off. I gifted these, so I put on a glove now that all of the cooking process was over, and just neatly lined them up in one of the more decorative boxes. And something I've never done before is tie a bow on screen. So just closing that up, and I've got some of my custom made sliver and bite ribbon that I will wrap this up. Now, somebody once told me, a very wise man once told me, you don't want to tie a knot in it. You want to pull on one of the lengths of ribbon and then have the ribbon be able to be peeled away. You don't want to have to fight to undo a knot. This wise man also said, never cut through your logo. What an amazing man. And here we are, ready to trial the donuts. Look at that glaze crack apart. And that doughy yet cooked interior. It's an absolute work of art. Thanks for joining me for Doughnuts today. If you like what you see, check out the rest of what Sliver and Bite has to offer right here on YouTube. See you soon.